So, Africa, start with the beginning. Oops. So, Embark, you know of Donovan. You probably have met Donovan and or Carrie on Zoom at some point. They started Embark in Tanzania when they were living and working climbing Kilimanjaro, their first treks, 2002. So they in general, Embark does climbs and travel all over the world. So you can go to Patagonia, you can go to the Dolomites, you can go to all kinds of places specifically for treks and hiking. I come into play for the safaris. So my name's Julia. If you contact us about safaris, you will get me. Um, like I said, I'm also in Portland, Oregon, 10 minutes from Donovan and Carrie. I have been traveling to Africa my entire life. My dad's from South Africa, my mom's from Zimbabwe. Um, I worked in Zambia at a little bush camp when I was at university, and I've been in the safari industry for over 20 years. So I traveled Africa as a kid. Now I take my kid to Africa with me. I was with my parents again in Tanzania this last November, and I typically travel to Africa 2 to 3 times a year. So this is my passion. I'm very, very knowledgeable about Africa, but I can't tell you a thing about anything to do with trekking. So I want to back up a little bit and talk about what is Africa. Um, here in America, we don't get a ton of information about what Africa really means, what it is, because it's not a country, which, you often hear a lot, even on the news. It is the world's second largest continent, 54 countries, over 1,500 languages, 147 World Heritage Sites. There is so much. There is more here than you could do in 30 lifetimes. So for me, for the safari side of things, we really focus on what we call sub-Saharan Africa. So imagine the deserts up here, the Sahara, Sub-Saharan Africa, East Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, with a side quest to the Seychelles and Madagascar and Mauritius, and then Southern Africa, which would be Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia. Oh, let's see. There we go. Okay, so thinking about things from an embark hiking lens, generally we are people who are going to be doing active things. You don't want to, as those of you who have been to Tanzania know, a lot of places you're sitting a lot in the vehicle, and that gives you the opportunity to get really close to the wildlife, especially places like the Serengeti, parts of South Africa, where the lions are so, in particular, are so used to people, so used to the vehicles, they will come and sit right in the shadow of the car because that's shade, that's perfect. So beyond that, there are a lot of places in Africa where you can get out of the vehicle and do some exploration. So this map just kind of talks about things, great hiking opportunities, Atlas Mountains, and we do Morocco because I love Morocco, not because it counts as sub-Saharan Africa. Um, Hiking in the Simien Mountains, Ethiopia has incredible culture, incredible food, and Africa's only true wolf. Everything else, all the other canids are different species, foxes, jackals, but the only wolf is in Ethiopia. Kenya, Tanzania, we can do Maasai-led walking. They are still a semi-nomadic tribe to this day. Rwanda, of course, famous for gorilla trekking. Uganda as well. Tanzania, besides the Great Migration, chimp trekking. Madagascar has some wild, unearthly landscapes that we'll talk about a little later. Zambia, we do some really cool walking safaris. It's the birthplace of walking safaris in Africa. Canoeing, the Drakensberg, literally the Dragon's Mountains, not nearly as challenging as a lot of the other hikes that we do, but a beautiful, beautiful scenery. There's rock art, Namibian desert. There's a lot to see and do. So a lot of it, when you're thinking about Africa, where do I want to go? Or where do I want to go next? Thinking about priorities. What is it that you want to see? What is it that you want to do? So we're going to start with Tanzania. Obviously, that's where Embark started. That's kind of where our heart is. So, Kilimanjaro, the Serengeti, Ngorongoro Crater we talked about is a World Heritage Site. I am very partial to the Selous area, which is in the southern part, where there's the Sand River, biggest crocodiles I've ever seen in my life. Terrifying, frankly, but amazing. You can do walks into a very random hot spring, which is really unique. You can do fly camping out in the middle of the sandbanks and sleep out there and listen to the hyenas all night. It's magical. And then, of course, chimpanzees in Zanzibar. This little picture down in the bottom. Zanzibar is an incredible destination. Good diving, good swimming. There are better places, but culturally, it's fantastic. And if you're interested in conservation, there's a really incredible marine wildlife conservation area in Pemba, which is a little island off the little island that is Zanzibar. Just gonna see, I can't check necessarily between slides for questions. Um, so let me, if there is a question, I will come back to you. Okay, so you get a little bit north. Kenya to me is what Tanzania was 50 years ago. The Masai Mara and the Serengeti are linked. They are the same ecosystem that the British just stuck a country boundary through, like they were really good at doing. But the Great Migration goes through that whole Mara Serengeti ecosystem. And that's what most people know. That's what we see on the BBC. We listen to David Attenborough. It's fabulous. Don't get me wrong. The Masai Mara has the highest concentration of big cats in Africa, which is definitely saying something. But outside of that, Kenya has so much to offer. Um, this lady in the middle here is part of the Samburu tribe who consider themselves cousins of the Maasai, but they're up north. There are places like this picture down in the bottom. If you've seen Out of Africa, all of the amazing Meryl Streep in her linen shirts, this is where they filmed part of that. That's overlooking the Masai Mara. There are family-friendly properties where it's third generation ranchers. Sometimes they were cattle ranchers and they still do cattle on part of the land. Sometimes they've turned all the other land back over into conservation and wildlife. Um, and you can kind of do what you want, like it's anybody's ranch. You can do walking, you can do mountain biking, you can go splash around in the river. No crocodiles, very shallow water. You can go beading with the Samburu ladies. You can potentially do some walking to some rock art. There's something called the Singing Wells up in Samburu, which is an incredible cultural experience. So Kenya has a lot. There's a lot more to it than just the Great Migration. Rwanda, I am very much partial to Rwanda. And I'll tell you why. So Rwanda, very small country. Obviously, if you've seen Hotel Rwanda or read anything about the genocide, it has been through incredible, incredible societal traumas, I would say would probably be the best word, societal traumas. And yet, if you go through the country, and it's very small, so I highly recommend having a guide and driving the whole time. You can take helicopters, but I think you really miss out. The people are so phenomenal, and it is an incredibly densely populated country as well. So everywhere you go, you see people. They're very friendly. They want to talk to you. They want to interact with you. They're very proud of their country. And for me, as a wildlife person, I was taken aback by just how much I fell in love with the people of Rwanda specifically. But of course, we come for the gorillas, right? Volcanoes National Park, see the gorillas. These little guys down here at the bottom are called golden monkeys, and I always like to start out with golden monkeys first because they like to hang out where they can go and raid the vegetable patches near the village. So it's a good entry. There's chimp trekking. Nungwe Forest is one of the oldest forests in Africa. Um, Absolutely wild. I thought I was going to see little raptors running down the pathways. Unbelievable. And then Akagera National Park is one of those worldwide conservation success stories. It was completely poached out during the genocide years, and through a variety of NGOs and investors and conservation projects, it is now back to being a Big Five park. And when I was there last 2 Novembers ago, I saw the Big Five in 2 days, which I was not expecting. I was just so impressed by the whole thing. So, Rwanda, again, like Kenya, which you'll hear me say again and again, because I am a safari nerd, there's a lot more than just gorillas. Okay, so moving down from East Africa, Zambia is a massive country. It is the copper belt. They are known for exporting and mining copper, but beyond that, they have some massive, massive wildlife parks that, because of access, are still very remote. There are fewer beds in the Kafue National Park than there are in 1 square mile of the Masai Mara. So thousands of beds, lodge hotel beds in the Masai Mara. There's less than 100 in Kafue National Park, which is about the same size. Actually, I think it's actually a little bit bigger. So to give you an idea about how remote and how wild it really is. So Zambia has half of the Victoria Falls. This picture here in the middle of the elephants in the river, that's one of my favorite lodges on the Victoria Falls side. Um, these elephants, there's a big channel in the front where it's not quite as deep as the main river. And so these elephants like to come in the dry season into that channel. And you can have your coffee, or if you're traditional in the afternoon, a gin and tonic, and watch the elephants often. Um, this is also where we do, I would say, the best walking safaris. There's a gentleman named Norman Carr who pioneered walking safaris in the 50s, 60s. Camping, walking from one camp to another, or staying in one camp and doing walks out every day. It really puts you in your place. When you are on foot, it is a totally different experience to being in the vehicle. We don't generally try to walk up on big game. Like if you see lions in the distance, you're not going to try to walk up to them, but they are around. You do see them. Because of that, walking guides are the best in the world. They have to be highly, highly qualified. Um, but you do get to do things like this picture here, up to the giraffes. You are not a threat when you're on foot. If anything, you sort of look like a weird creature that they're not really sure about, so they might be a little skittish, but you can really experience the bush in a totally different way on foot. There are a couple other sort of specials here. Canoeing, which we'll also talk about in Zimbabwe. Um, there are wide rivers and channel rivers. There's also a couple of dams and lakes. There's a lot of opportunities, boating safaris. If you are a birder, or if you think you might in your future life become a bird nerd, which for those of you who've already been to Africa, you might already be halfway there. The carmine bee eaters up here in the corner, they are a migratory species, and you can find them in South Luangwa in October and November. They come down and they nest in the riverbanks, and it's just incredible. Okay, oops, wrong way. Just south of Zambia is Zimbabwe. Again, some of you might know about the political upheaval. Mugabe was a dictator. Zim went through some really tough times. My mother is from Zimbabwe, and I grew up as a child spending time here. I'm obviously from California. My parents immigrated. No accent here. I'm the weird American cousin. But these are my first memories of safari. And the Zimbabwean people have done an incredible job of rehabilitating their country and saving some of their incredible national parks and wildlife places. There are some places that are really off the beaten path here that require either a day or two of driving or charter flights. Great Zimbabwe ruins were an incredible civilization that's way out in the middle of nowhere. Really worth it if you're into history or anthropology. These elephants here, this is monopools. This is sort of the famous Zimbabwe picture. They get up sometimes on their hind legs and feed from these trees. They also have the other side of the Victoria Falls. And if you ask a Zimbabwean, their side is better. If you ask a Zambian, their side is better. Realistically, having done both at various times of year, it depends on when you go. So you tell me when you want to go. I will tell you which side that you're going to want to be on. Um, because the falls has different properties at all times of the year. It's really full parts of the year, it's really empty parts of the year, but each season has its own, I would say, points of delight. Um, Zimbabwe also, because you have a myriad of parks, you have waters, you have lakes, you have rivers, you can do more. You can do walking, you can do boating. Um, if you are really keen to get some sort of more cultural, like the modern, what's happening now in parts of Africa, there are some really interesting village visits that are not let's go look in people's windows style, right? These are projects and tours that are put together and led by community members. And it's just as much about cultural exchange as it is about them bringing in a source of income from their families. Especially some of the remote villages that are on the side of the parks, like Hwange National Park. There's a fantastic private reserve down there where all of the staff is from the local village. And if you go, especially great with kids, if you go during the school day or during like when school's in session, you can walk with the kids into school, meet the school teacher. Your guide went to that school, he knows everybody. It's a really fun way to get a feel for the people. Botswana. This is the other thing we see on TV. There are incredible documentaries made in Botswana. Part of that is because, unlike most other African countries, Botswana was never colonized. And that is mostly because most of the country is desert, and the other part of it floods every year. So it's never had a big population. Diamonds weren't discovered there until much later. And because of that, they've really gone for a low impact, potentially higher cost model of safari, which means everything is very remote, very wild, very unique. Um, in the past 10 years, there have been a ton of less expensive properties that have opened up. My favorite things, small, maybe six tents, very intimate, on the ground, just classic the way a safari should be. Um, so up north, you have the Chobe River, you have these Makoros, which is how the locals in the Okavango get around. That water is probably 2 feet deep, maybe not very deep, not deep enough for hippos. Um, bird life, of course, is fantastic. Lots of great helicopter options, tons of photography. People are really into photography. If you can't live without your camera, Botswana is an amazing place to go. And then down here at the bottom, the baobab trees, and of course, the meerkats. They are habituated. So a researcher has been sitting with these two meerkat families every day for, I think we're now year 22, 21 of this study. So they are very, very relaxed, very happy to just hang out. The meerkat families always have meerkats, who are gatherers and those who are nannies for the babies and those who are lookouts. So you can see this lookout up here on Tanya's head is using the height to his advantage. Namibia, um, if you have ever been to Germany, stay with me, and seen the houses that were built like this for the snow to come off of, that's what you see in Windhoek, which is the capital city of Namibia. It was a German colony, and somewhere along the line, they decided they needed to make roofs like this for the snow to come off, even though Namibia is a desert. So we have desert for the vast majority of the country. You have the Atlantic on one side. Skeleton Coast, well named for all of the shipwrecks. Again, very remote. Really, really cool hiking and walking trails here, especially because it's so arid. There's not a lot of wildlife. It just can't support it. Um, the flip side of that is there's some really cool conservation work going on and some really cool opportunities to trek desert adapted rhino and desert adapted elephant, both on foot and in a vehicle. You do get, if you go north, Etosha, this picture up at the top with the elephant, it is a national park with a series of watering holes. So you're pretty guaranteed to see a lot of wildlife, but you'll see it's a lot of zebra, it's a lot of buck, it's a lot of oryx, some lions, not a huge diversity of species. Um, One of my favorite things about Namibia, this bottom picture, are the sleepouts. There are a number of properties like this one on Dooley and Damaraland. This one, the bed rolls out so you can sleep under the stars. And because there's no, you know, what I would say carnivorous, dangerous wildlife around, it's very safe. And it is an unbelievable experience. Cold, definitely cold at night because of the desert aspect, but worth it. South Africa, um, again, I'm biased. My dad's from here. I have family and friends in Cape Town. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. The nice thing about South Africa is it's great all year round. You go in the summer, you go to the beach, it's amazing. You go in the winter, you might get some rain in Cape Town. It'll be a little cold, but the wildlife is fantastic, really all year round. Go in the spring for the wildflowers, go in the fall for the whale watching. There's just tons and tons to do. Great for families of all ages, malaria free. Can't take yellow fever vaccination, don't want to worry about malaria stuff. You can do that here. Really into food and wine, best food and wine on the continent with caveats. I love Ethiopian food and I love Senegalese food, but Cape Town, I would say, has the biggest variety. Penguins, kayaking, snorkeling, surfing, shark diving, beaches, mountains, literally pretty much everything. And because it has a first world infrastructure, it's really easy to get around. There's also some really fantastic accessible properties, which I think makes a big difference, especially if you're trying to travel with multi-generational, you know, trips. You want to take your kids, your grandkids, and sometimes it can be a little chaotic, but South Africa is very easy to navigate. And I wanted to touch on Madagascar. I know it's a whole different world. And if you were thinking about singing lemurs from the TV show, I definitely understand. Um, Madagascar is really unique. The infrastructure is horrible. The French is unintelligible. And it is absolutely the most remarkable, amazing, weird place. Incredible walking, hiking, these Singi National Park over here that looks like spines is complete world away from these white beaches with amazing scuba diving, which is a world away from these baobabs and the dustiness down here. Ooh, Wendy, I will come back to that question. Thank you. Um, this is also lemurs. I like to think of lemurs, and I'm sure a zoologist is turning in their grave, but I like to think of lemurs as pre-monkeys, right? This is what we get before we got baboons, before we got gorillas. And they are so unique, and each species has its own weird little niche in the world. So I find it a fascinating, completely, I know I said the word, but I'm going to say it again, otherworldly place to be where you really get the extremes of everything in one place. You want to spend some time, you got to be patient. This is definitely a place where African time holds true more than any other destination I've talked about before. As I said, I know I've just thrown a ton of information at you, and I could talk about this till I am blue in the face. So I want to take some questions. Um, Let me figure this out here, how I can see everybody, if possible. Let's see. So Wendy asked, how far in advance is an ideal time to start working on your adventure? So, ideal time for a safari, ideal, right? In my dreams and yours, 1 to 2 years in advance. And the reason for that is because a lot of these properties, like I said, are very small, 6 tenths, 10 tenths. If you're traveling with kids or you want a bigger room, they might have a family room, but once those rooms are booked, they're booked. So to get the most flexibility, the best properties, the best dates that work the best for your budget and your travel companions, whether that's you, yourself, and you, or whether that's, 20 people, the further out you book, the better options you have. Donovan says different types of lodging. There's a little bit of everything. So it really depends on where you go. Personally, I like the tented camps. Every place I recommend has ensuite bathrooms. There are no, I can't think of a single place that does not have ensuite bathrooms because the last thing you want to do in the middle of the night is get out of your tent or your room and get eaten by a lion. I've never lost a client. I don't know anybody who's been eaten by a lion because everything's ensuite. So everything has attached bathrooms. Um, Depending if you're looking at something that's very luxurious, like a huge room with a private plunge pool and a star deck that you can sleep out on the top in a really remote part of Africa, that exists. If you're looking for a hotel style, something that is more of a lodge where more like a runs like a hotel, a little bit more comfortable for you, that is also available. There are a lot of different options out there. And what it really comes down to for most people is your travel style and your budget. I would say that for, you know, Embark, you guys are already hikers. You're already prone to being adventurous people. So I love to pick the really fun places for people who are a little bit more adventurous. Wendy asked which lodging includes showers. Again, all ensuite. So that includes showers. Hot water is 24/7 hot and cold water is the norm now. There are still some bucket showers, the old school kind, where they heat up your bucket for you. We will be also sharing a video on our YouTube explaining about bucket showers, which I put together with one of the camp managers from my trip in Tanzania. But most of the camps these days do have 24/7 power, typically solar, and 24/7 hot water. And with very, very few exceptions, the properties on Safari include all your meals. You are in the middle of nowhere. You can't just pop down to McDonald's. There's no other restaurants. So they include all your meals. A lot of them also include local drinks, like your traditional gin and tonic for sundowners, local wines, which means good South African wines, and local beers, which means the equivalent of Bud Light wherever you are. In Tanzania, you get Kilimanjaro. In Zambia, you get Mozio. So it's all kind of the same thing. Donovan asked, certain times of year where one region is better than the other. The short answer is yes, with the exception of South Africa, which is so far south that it has much more of a Mediterranean climate. But yes, every country has its own seasons, its own things to keep in mind. So when you first call me or email me, that is one of the things that I will want to talk to you about. Because you might say, I have to travel in May. I'm like, great. Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, out. It's raining. But Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Zambia, perfect. Absolutely lovely. Okay. So I know those of you who have been to Tanzania before, do you have any specific things that you want to ask? So actually, going with that, Wendy asked a suggested length of time. I'm sure it's personal based on, but for first or second timers. So I highly recommend a minimum of 7 days. Best time frame, 10 to 14 days. Part of that is the jet lag. You're going halfway across the world. It takes 24 to 48 hours, depending on your flight route, to get to Africa. And then you want to get over jet lag. Um, so for me, 7 days is cutting it real short. I like it 10 to 14 days. Um, it also depends on what you're going to be doing, right? If you're going just to northern Tanzania, very few properties, because they're inside the national parks, allowed walking, no night drives allowed, um, no off-road driving allowed. So you do end up spending a lot of time in the vehicle. So maybe you want to break it up a little bit, go to Zanzibar, maybe do one of the southern parks where you can do some more activities. If you're going to South Africa, you do Cape Town, 4 or 5 days, easy. Do the Kruger area, 4 or 5 days, go up to Victoria Falls for 2 days. Some of the places that you go really, it ends up being kind of a squash to get everything in that you want to go. Um, I will say a lot of people start out going to Tanzania. That's their very first trip. And then you want to go back. You want to go back, see, okay, how's Kenya different? Because it's right next door. Tell me about South Africa. What is that like? Every single country has its own charm and its own unique things. So, it's also really hard to say, well, where should I go first? I would say what you have in mind should be your first trip because you're already halfway there. Can you combine Zimbabwe and Botswana in one trip? Yes, very, very common. Botswana, I wish I had a map. Um, if you imagine something called the Four Corners. So Botswana, the Caprivi Strip, part of Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe all converge onto the Kazangula border. So those four countries all touch. So a lot of people either start or end their trip at Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe and then go on to Botswana. But you can also do, if you've got the time, a pretty epic trip is to go from Harare on the farthern eastern side of Zimbabwe, do Mana Pools, Kariba, Hwange, Victoria Falls, then zip over to Botswana and do Chobe, Linyanti, Okavango, Kalahari. You can also, if you wanted to keep on going, there are also flights 3 times a week from Botswana into Windhoek in Namibia, and flights 6 days a week from Namibia down into Cape Town. I will say this for logistics in Africa, you do need to leave yourself some extra time because a lot of places you can't get to in one day. Like you can't get from Cape Town to the Okavango in one day. So you'd end up routing through most likely Victoria Falls. But those are all the logistics that I handle for you. So you don't have to worry about that. I'm the one that makes sure everything flows. You're traveling on the right dates for these random flights, you know. What else? Anything specific about the wildlife? Um, if somebody says, "Hey, I want to go see cheetah," I would recommend Serengeti, Masai Mara, Namibia. If you say, "I want to see leopard," I would say Sabi Sands, Zambia, probably the Serengeti again. It just kind of depends, but I would say most of the animals are present in most of the destinations. There are some things that does not apply, like rhinos. The poaching on rhinos has been brutal, but there are some incredible rhino conservation success stories in places where you can see rhinos. Okay,
Will you put up your email and phone number again, Julia?
absolutely. If I can figure out how, give me one moment. I am, let's see. Can you see it?
Yes.
Excellent. I am much better with a pair of binoculars than I am with Zoom. Um, But yeah, you can reach me. Email is probably the best way. Our 503 number is our main office line. But if you email me, then I can send you my link for my WhatsApp and text and all of that. Um, Donovan just told me about how I can add WhatsApp to my laptop, which I didn't even know I could do. So email's the best place to start. Um, I My next trip to Africa isn't until May, so I will be around until then. Um, and even though I love my dream is for people to plan 1 to 2 years in advance, you don't have to. The more flexible you are with your dates and budget, the less exacting you need to be with planning ahead. So I'm always happy to check availability. I'm always happy to chit chat about options. Um, maybe if you want to go in April this year, we can't get you April this year. Maybe we book now for April next year. And I'm always happy to ask if they'll hold the rates because rates do go up every year. So, there are always, I'm always happy to ask for things. I've worked with a lot of these camps and lodges for many, many, many years.
Julia, one thing, when I talked to some, shall we say, well-to-do friends who, worked at Microsoft in the day, they spent a whole lot more on their safari experiences than I did. I had a great time, they had a great time, but it would be useful to understand. And I realize I'm not going to ask you to give like exact dollars, but sort of like, okay, here's what low end, mid, and high level looks like. Not so, I mean, dollar, I guess, is useful, but I'm talking about the quality of the experience. Like,
Yeah.
is it way more personalized at the high end? And can you talk to that just a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the very short answer is it depends. There's a lot of factors here. So, destination, time of year, how many people, what you're looking for, all of those factors go in there. But like you said in Tanzania, you can have a very classic, what I call it classic tented camp, where it's on the ground, there's no decking. It's, a stand up, what we call a marrow tent, a stand up tent, but it's a little bit smaller. The decor is minimal. Everything you need, nothing you don't. Comfy beds, good food, great staff, bucket showers. And you're seeing the exact same lions as the guys, and that's maybe with park fees and guides and everything. I would say low end 750 to 1,000 per person per night. The park fees in Tanzania really get you. And you'll be seeing the exact same lions as somebody staying at a camp 20 minutes away, and they're paying $2,000 per person per night or $3,000 per person per night in some of the private reserves. So, because the Serengeti is a national park, that is a very different aspect than if you're going someplace like Botswana, where if you stay in one of the lower end camps that's in a national park, the activities are limited, no night drives, no walking, no boating. But Tanzania doesn't have the same network of private reserves that Botswana does. So Botswana has mostly private reserves. So you pop over one private reserve over from the national park, you have far fewer people, you have far greater freedom to do activities. Um, your tent might be exactly the same, but you might pay twice as much because you're paying for that remote personalized experience. Um, so, talking about dollar signs, budgeting, I recommend $1,000 per person per night as a baseline across all countries. There are places that are significantly more. There's one camp now in the Okavango Delta that's $4,000 per person per night, which blows my mind. Um, for me, the value is not in the chandeliers. I love wine. I don't care about a wine cellar in the bush. That just seems silly. I don't care about a chandelier. Um, I would rather put my money towards smaller group sizes in the vehicles, either a private vehicle or maybe maximum 4 people instead of maximum 8 people in a safari vehicle. I would rather stay in a camp with 6 tents than a camp with 20 tents. And I would rather stay in a private reserve where I can do things like sleeping out under the stars, which I love, and do walking safaris, which I love, than stay in a national park where I don't have those opportunities. So I think part of what it comes down to is this is for a lot of people a once in a lifetime trip, right? This is the dream. So I want to make sure that I can make that happen without without it being at the expense of having a less than great experience. Was that helpful?
It is.
Okay,
And
good.
I would say that the first one I did, which was with Embark, and
Mhm.
was probably more the low end, was fantastic. I can